And hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to Get a Grip with Coach Elix. I'm your host, Coach Elix, and with me, my amazing and wonderful co host.
An attorney slash medium, Stephen Frederick, is here.
Stephen the Medium, who happens to also be my husband, my amazing, very flamboyant husband, whom I love very much. How are you, Stephen?
I'm flamboyant.
Aren't you? Well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with being from. I'm flamboyant.
You are?
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. I think
Okay.
that's a beautiful representation of who we are. So, how are you?
I'm good.
You are.
Yes.
We just came back from a wonderful vacation, and a vacation that I personally felt I needed in the worst way possible because the last 4 months have been really difficult and ongoing, with my mom's illness, her passing, and all the stuff in between. I almost felt like I was on the, at risk for burnout, both mental and emotional burnout. So we took an amazing vacation to California, and we also celebrated your birthday. How was that vacation for you?
It was amazing.
Yes.
To be able to spend my birthday in Palm Springs was a dream come true.
Yes, and this is our second time in Palm Springs, and I think I loved it this time even more than I loved it the last time.
I
And
agree.
I loved it so much that we actually ended up coming back. And the first part of that was a little bit of business for both of us. And so we got to meet some very, very special people, and we're working on some very special projects. And how anything you want to say about that part, Stephen?
No, it was we can't. It was just a really great meeting, and just stay tuned.
Stay tuned. A lot of very amazing things coming uh, to you very, very, very soon. But I do want to say a shout out to Miss Kay, who is being a friend of mine for many, many years, and she's very likely listening. And she's also somebody who works for NBC, and she took a day to give us a private tour of the NBC studios backstage. And I thought, Stephen, that was one of the highlights of our vacation.
It's always a highlight getting to see Miss K. I love getting to see her. So that's always like number one part of the trip when we go to California is that we have to get a date to see her. And then you add what she did for us, and driving around backstage in a golf cart was just incredible.
Yeah, and driving around places that nobody else gets to go unless you're filming, in one of their studios, and that was just so fascinating, and I loved every minute of it. And we also saw our young talent friend Ian, who is doing amazing things in California, in Los Angeles, and some other very amazing people. And then we celebrated your birthday. We celebrated your birthday literally every day, every single day in California. I kid you not, people. You should look at the pictures. Every dinner that we had, there was a birthday cake with a candle for
And,
Stephen.
and someone singing to me.
And somebody singing, absolutely, every single day. And we're not done celebrating, right?
No, it's June.
Yeah.
I got the whole month of June. I have until next, Friday, before June leaves us. So,
Yes. So we did that, and again, Palm Springs. I felt that was pure R&R for us. I mean, we stayed in a beautiful, gorgeous place. We got up, we went to breakfast, we went to the pool, we exercised, and then we went to dinner. And we went to some amazing restaurants in Palm Springs. And that was like, repeat every day. That's all we did every day. And I thought that was just, it really was. I feel that it was exactly what my body needed. My body, my mind, my spirit, it just needed that. Um, recharge. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I loved going to these incredible places for dinner, but just also walking through Palm Springs and the main drag, and just enjoying the people and the places. Palm Springs is just a fantastic place, and it's some place I've ever always wanted to go. And I didn't know the first time we went last year, and I don't know how I found this out, but there is a Lucille Ball statue. I Love Lucy there. So of course we had to find it, and I had to take a picture with it. So, and even some people that are native to Palm Springs didn't even know that. They said the Marilyn Monroe statue, because there's a huge Marilyn Monroe that everybody sees. I'm like, no, Lucy, and we found it though.
Yeah, and that's because you love old movies and you love old Hollywood, if you will. I think that's Palm Springs has that very special charm. But we also went to this amazing Italian restaurant. I can't remember the name, Stephen. That was known because the Lucy Show, they taped an episode in that restaurant, right?
Yes, so it's Michelli's, but this is it was that's not in Palm Springs, that's in Hollywood. But I wanted to go there because one of the episodes when Lucy makes pizza was actually filmed in that restaurant, and it's the oldest Italian restaurant in California, I think. I can't remember, but it was the energy in there was so amazing. Now, this show was filmed in the 1950s, but the fact that she actually was there is something to be said. And we got to go there, and on the menu it actually has a little blurb about her and filming the episode there. So we did two Lucy things, one in Hollywood, one in Palm Springs.
Yeah, it was really a lot of fun, and then of course we get home, and thank God we got home. We were super relaxed, and then we had an event with our washer. You want to tell people what the event was, Stephen?
Well, yeah, it was one morning this week that I put in laundry, and the laundry is on the second floor outside of our bedroom in a guest bathroom. And I'm downstairs. Helix went off to work, and with the boys, with the two dogs, and I'm eating breakfast, and all of a sudden I could hear water dripping, and I thought it was Django lifting his leg, which is very unusual. They don't do that in the house. So I jumped up, and I like ran into the living room where I could hear it, but peripherally I could see Django and little Ricky in their beds. I'm like, oh, it's not them. And I see water coming from the ceiling. So flew upstairs, and the washing machine was leaking. Thank God there was a tray underneath the washing machine, so caught most of it, and I obviously just had to stop it. And that was chaotic. Of just even though you shut the water off, the water's still in the washing machine, so that still has to drain somewhere. So I had like cookie sheets that I was catching the water underneath the tray and just like dumping it out, and it all worked out. And yesterday, as I'm sure that's what you're leading up to, Elix, we went to get a new washer and dryer, and
Yeah, so you explained the whole thing. I come home, Stephen is in having a physical event because there's all this water coming down. A conniption coming down from the second floor. But we got that on. It was a mess. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. And thank God we were here, because if that had happened while we were away and we had people in the house, sitting our dogs, our children, that would have been chaotic. But nevertheless, we went to this amazing place, and so one of my friends recommended this place in Somerset. It's a town outside of where we live.
Yeah, it's Somerset.
And we went there, and they said, well, we do not deliver to the Cape. And of course, because the Cape Cod, it's known for its tourism now in the summer, and the bridges get very crowded and nobody wants to go over the bridge. So no, they don't deliver. But they gave us this recommendation for this other place in the Cape. And, they spoke very, very highly of this place. And So we said, fine, we're gonna go there. It happened to be very close to our house, right, Stephen? Like 10 minutes, maybe
Yeah, if that.
if that. And the name of the place is it Lamco?
Lampco, yes.
Yeah, appliances. And I'm telling you, they are based in Attleboro, which is where our home station WARA is based out of. I'm telling you, kudos to these people. They were amazing. Matthew was amazing. They were so service driven and so good at understanding what we needed and how quickly we needed it. I was super impressed. So I want to do a shout out to Lamco for going out of the way, especially to Matthew, going out of the way to take care of us.
You know, Matthew asked specific questions, and you know, even though the main office and showroom, which is bigger, is in Attleboro, obviously there's one down here on the Cape, so that's the one we went to. But Matthew was terrific. But I will tell you something that I mentioned on my live. I did a Facebook Live yesterday or last night when I do readings, and you know, we went to this other place on the Cape that was referred to by a very good friend of ours, and it was horrible. Horrible does not even cover what I really want to say. We walked in and they were the most unfriendly people. I said to Elix, when I walked in as a medium, I could feel the toxicity in that environment. It was horrible. Just so bad. I could not wait to get out of there. And one of the things why I bring this up is because I think it's really important for people to understand that if you have that environment, whatever you're purchasing from there is going to have that same environment when it gets to your house.
That same energy.
Exactly. So yeah. You're gonna have more issues with the equipment because it's coming from this energy that is horrific. It was horrible. And you know, energy is energy, right? Energy just changes. It, you know, it doesn't die. And so if something, whether it's an object or not, has been sitting in this toxic environment, when it gets to your place, it's not only bringing that toxicity to your home, but it's also got that toxic environment and energy, as Elix said, in it, and just opens you up for big issues. So, and you know, when we went to the original one that we stopped in Somerset, and they were fantastic.
They were amazing.
You know, and we just couldn't use them because they wouldn't go over the bridge. When I said to them, we went to one place and on the Cape, and it was horrible. They all named it immediately. All of them.
Everyone knew.
Every one of them named the company immediately, because I was thinking, because we asked for a recommendation on the Cape, and I'm like, oh dear God, please don't be the place we already went. And of course it wasn't. They gave Lamco, and Matthew was amazing. But the other place was, all three of them named it at the same time, how horrible they are. And so, I said to Felix, I wouldn't buy a pen from them, never mind anything else.
So the good news is that we got our washer and dryer from an amazing place with amazing energy. So I know it's going to be a great product that's going to last for a long, long time. So,
and if you're local, if you're near the Attleboro area or the Cape area, go to Lamco.
So that's where they want to go. So Stephen, yes, we got to move along because we are at first quarter of the hour, and we do need to take a commercial break. But before we do that, today's show is really about celebrating Pride Month and really talking about why pride matters. You know, oftentimes people who are not in the LGBTQ community, all they just see a pride flag. And for many people, they think that's what pride is all about. But pride is a lot more than just a flag. It has a much deeper meaning, and to anyone, any of us who it's part of the queer community. And I have an amazing guest. This is a person I was lucky, privileged to meet many years ago while I was doing a training for a New York-based agency. His name is Gabby Garcia Vera. Gabby is a queer Latino from Puerto Rico who has been recognized for organizing experience across social justice movements for over 15 years. He focuses on reproductive justice, racial equality, immigrant rights, and LGBTQ liberation and rights. So I think Gabby is the perfect person to talk about pride and why pride matters. So When we come back, we're gonna start the conversation, and if you want to call us at 508 222 1320. We'll be right back. And hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to Get a Grip with Coach Elex. I'm your host, Coach Elex. With me, my amazing husband and co host,
Stephen the Medium is here.
Stephen the Medium, who happens to be an amazing attorney as well. And today we are talking about celebrating really Pride Month and why does Pride matter? That's the subject of today. And like I said earlier, today's guest is somebody that I met many years ago while I was doing a training in a New York based agency. And he was fascinating. Then I could tell he was committed to what he was doing. Gabby is a vocal queer who is from Puerto Rico. He happens to be in Puerto Rico right now, as I understand it, who is passionate about racial equality, immigrants' rights, liberation, LGBTQ liberation. Through his leadership, Gabby and his organization helps people reimagine and rethink infrastructure through all aspects of organizational management, through coaching and consulting. This being a Pride Month, he makes a perfect guest for the show. Gabby Garcia Vera, welcome and thank you for joining us. How are you?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm good. I'm good.
So,
I was actually just telling folks when I was getting on the line. I am in Puerto Rico. I'm actually visiting family at the moment. So yeah.
and I mean, first of all, I'm super envious that you're in Puerto Rico because that's our hometown also, And we can't wait to get back there, even though it's probably 120 degrees there right now.
Hace un calor fuerte. It's definitely hot in these streets.
So Gabby, I know that you are a master facilitator in several areas, and and I really know that what you do comes with a deep commitment to the people that you serve. So why don't we start with you sharing with people a little bit about what you do and the agency that you're working with right now?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. So I run a small consulting shop called Flamboyant Consulting. We are a uh, small but mighty team of consultants and folks really working around just like a culturally nuanced approach to what we're trying to do. I think I started the agency a little over a year ago, and really in response to I kept showing up in relationship to organizations, to companies, to projects that I was working on, and I was, there was alignment around where we're trying to go, but not alignment process, or alignment around process, but not around vision. And I really saw this as not just simply a burden that falls on the people who I think get left behind because people say like, well, that conversation's too hard. That conversation like it's going to take too much time. Like actually, the thing that's taking the most time is the fact that we're not actually talking about the thing we're supposed to be talking about, or like we're not being clear about like the thing that's actually coming up, and so. And so from that place, I really set out to build something that I felt was really wholehearted, from a place that felt like it was culturally nuanced and appropriate, right? I think sometimes also we're like showing up for conversations that we're not ready to have or people didn't consent in. And so really building our practice and our praxis around what we do, around that central idea of like, are we willing to show up deeply in our values? And for us, that looked really simple. I think we started. I began by naming the company because I feel like everything, at least for my own personal process, everything began with a name. But the second thing I did immediately after I created the company was really think deeply about what were the values that I wanted to be clear about when we were working with folks. And it looked like choosing courage over comfort, being clear about the both and. I think sometimes we're like, well, if it's not this, then it's that. And sometimes we have to acknowledge the duality and the paradox that exists within things. I also wanted to be clear about like joy and healing. Like to me, it's like if the work isn't healing you, right? And if you're really pursuing your own endeavor, if you're someone who's an entrepreneur, if you're building something, if you don't find that the work is bringing some kind of joy or some kind of healing, then I think you're doing the wrong work, right? And not that there aren't moments in I think every kind of job where you're like, I'm doing a thing because I have to do a thing. But I think, when you think about what you do and what brings you joy, having that center of gravity, I think makes everything else clear in your own vision. And then really thinking about, permission to feel things and not confabulate them. And so I think like the easiest way to explain is I think all feelings are real and valid. Your response to those feelings are maybe not always appropriate, but I think also we have to really talk about confabulation. Where does a feeling become a truth? And is that the actual thing that shows up, or is it the thing that gets in the way? Because I think we have a lot of feelings that we know are like absolutely valid. It's when we begin to make meaning out of data that we don't have and out of truth that we don't know, because we're seeking and rather than asking.
Gabby, I'm listening to you, and you made so many fascinating points, and you in listening to you, you validate why you are such the right person to have on the show. We're talking about celebrating Pride, and you talk about not having the conversations that we should be having because we're not comfortable having those conversations. And I often think, Gabby, that when it comes to pride, people feel very uncomfortable. talking about pride. Why do you think that is? And why do you think pride is something that we should all be talking about?
I think I think that for me, pride is a thing that needs to be continued to be articulated. Because I think for so long, even as we articulate what does pride mean, I think that there's this desire to pigeonhole queer and trans people, LGBTQ people, and community in this
Yes.
way that is very monolithic. That says like, oh, well, like I love you as long as you don't do whatever in front of me. I mean, as long as I don't live my life, as long as I don't exist, as long as you know, in Puerto Rico ahora, but I live in Florida, a place where our current governor and our current political leadership is doing things like banning books, like stopping the teaching of like black and brown history of of queer communities, right? Uh, and when I really think about it, the thing that boils my blood probably more than anything is the truth of the matter is they're not they're not brave enough to go after adults, right? They're targeting children. They're targeting young people because in our society, young people don't really have access to the rights. Like who speaks for young people other than young people, right? And I think there's such a big difference as we have those conversations. Also, to say like we have some responsibility to throw a rope back and to throw a line back to the people behind us. No one I know showed up magically with all the answers and said, "Yo sí sé todo," and was like, I'm gonna like, start a revolution. Everyone was shown by someone, and everyone takes, I think, what we bring forward from that place. I think it's so important nowadays to be really clear and really direct with people. I think also we have this, and I think it is like I know that when I show up and when I'm nervous, the thing I probably hold the most tender is I'm like, especially with people I love, is I'm like, will this change my perception of you? Will you show up the way I want you to, the way I need you to show up? And I think it's in those moments where we see the sliding of a glass door. And I was recently, I can't remember the researcher's name, but he talked about these moments, these sliding glass door moments where like, there are moments where we make choices, right? And for me, it's always kind of like if you're thinking about un muñequito or like a cartoon, it's always the villain is always only one or two choices away from actually being the superhero. Oftentimes, when we look at like cartoons in that way, and it's those moments that I think require us to really dig deep. And it's like, cool, my grandmother said something that was hurtful. My tia used a word that described gay people inappropriately, and I said nothing, and she said
Hmm.
nothing, and then we sat there in the uncomfortableness of it. And rather than say, "Hey, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that," it slipped, or us even having a conversation about it, nothing was said, right? To me, the adverse reaction of that is to say, like, BB, what, what just came out of your mouth? Like, what?
Yes.
Or to be like, that's not okay to say. Like, I love you, and it doesn't matter where you were raised or where or when you grew up or whatever. But if we don't say anything, then nothing is said, right? And we also, I'm a firm believer of we teach people how to treat us. And so we teach people how to show up in relationship to us and to show up to love and protect us, right? Because I think we talk a lot about the interchange of love and it being a thing that is powerful, that it moves people. And the people that are most equipped to change hearts and minds of people who are homophobic, who are transphobic, who don't get it, who have 10,000 questions that are inappropriate are the people that they love, right? Like, that's why we are actually most equipped to change our abuela and our abuelo's mind. That's why, like, we are most equipped to change our parents' mind. And certainly that is not the experience of everyone. But here's what I will say. We know that from data and from research that when people show up to have wholehearted conversations with people that they know, that they are most equipped to move people that look like them, that sound like them, that have a personal tie to them. And I think important than anything. I think like holding that one truth, I think gives us a tremendous amount of power to understand the context from which we go and to which we can bring people really along with us, right? Because I think it's like, yeah, people are born in different generations, but like we are in relationship to them. None of
Yeah,
us is operating in a vacuum.
yeah. You're fascinating and you're so on point. Gabby, I want to keep talking to you, but we do need to take a commercial break. So hang in there. We're going to take a short commercial break and we'll be right back. If anyone wants to join the conversation, you can call 508 222 1320. We'll be right back.
Got it.
And hello, everyone, and welcome back to Get a Grip with Coach Elix. I am your host, Coach Elix. With me, my amazing co-host,
Steven the Medium.
Stephen the Medium. And today we're talking about Pride Month. Why does Pride matter? And we have an amazing guest coming live from Puerto Rico, Gabby Garcia Vera, who is a queer Latino Puerto Rican who's been recognized for organizing experience across social justice movements for over the past 15 years. And he focuses on issues around reproductive justice, racial equality, immigrant rights, and LGBTQ liberation and rights. Gabby, welcome back and thank you for being here with us. Um, Gabby, we're listening to you. Everything you said is so fascinating. I couldn't even, uh, didn't want to interrupt you, but I know Stephen has a couple of questions for you. Stephen,
Gabby,
go
it is
ahead.
Yeah,
so great to meet you, and kudos to you for what you're doing. Because as I'm listening to you, I could keep listening to you. And it's so relevant right now because of the world. There's just so much hate in this world. And, I'm not someone who likes to even talk about the negativity. I'm always trying to be, and Elix is too, very positive. But, it is, like you just said, you have to talk about it. It's here. And, there's so many states led by Republican senators that are just trying to reverse all the rights that LGBTQ have reached. But, I just want your opinion on something, Gabby, because there's also people out there that are really, I think, supporters of LGBTQ individuals, but they sort of don't follow sort of like what we follow, the specific of the news, where we're at, and sort of have the mindset that, oh my God, like you guys, the community, the GLBTQ community has just come so far, and guys, you can get married now, and they're sort of innocently just not doing much of anything or not thinking about what's really going on behind the scenes. And do you come across that? Do you come, in conversations with people that are sort of taken back when you say this is what's happening or this is what you need to do?
I mean, and thank you for that question. I think y'all were talking earlier in this show just about, sometimes when we go places, things, people, everything is energy. And, and from that perspective, I think, it's really important. I think those are moments, right, that sort of like flick a switch. Those are opportunities in organizing, right? We talk a lot about this in our work, but I always tell people, I'm like, organizing at its core foundation is really about things: money, people, and power. And not necessarily in that order, really, because it's money, because it's people, money, and power, right? And because without people, there is no money, and without that combination of two, right, the ability to transmit and to up your message, right, looks very different. And I think that nowadays, right, I think that nowadays there are definitely people who are sitting there sort of like they're not really paying attention to the news because the news cycle has become really overwhelming in a lot of regards, right? I think it's really hard. We have been experiencing, like, we're still in a pandemic, right? Like, we haven't found a cure to this thing that has had us all locked up at home for the last, like, several years. And I think we're still trying to figure out what normal feels like, and we have to acknowledge that, like, whatever normal was before, it is not now. And that's okay, but I think it requires a paradigm shift for a lot of people. I think the other thing is in those moments when we are having conversations with people, and this happens to me with other queer folks too, or, people who identify as LGBTQ, I think there are people out there who are like living in their lane and they're like, oh, I didn't know that XYZ happened, because it's not the thing that they're focused on. I think when those conversations come up for me, the thing I often think is like, yeah, this is actually happening and it's really concerning to me, right? Like, I think we have a tendency to front, to want to make comfortable the thing that is uncomfortable. We don't want to bring up something that might ruffle people's feathers because we're worried about, like, being, in Spanish, we like la persona que está bien pesado, like the person that weighs on the conversation. And I think that we have to get a little bit more comfortable with not only just getting uncomfortable, but being vulnerable in those moments, right? Because I think courage requires vulnerability. There is no one without the other. And I think that to sit in a conversation with someone who's like, I thought everything was fine, and to say, actually, I'm really worried. I'm really worried because, like, what this means for, like, young queer people who are trying to get educated nowadays. I'm really feeling tender because, what if right now we're talking about not talking about us, right? And, like, not teaching queer history. What happens when they try to revoke our right to be married? And I'll remind folks, I think, when we think about Pride being a thing that is revolutionary, right? Pride began as a riot. But long before Pride began as a riot, queer and trans people have existed for as long as humanity has existed. we know that like documented, both in like in the way that people have documented history throughout time. We see like we see clear delineations of it in nature as well, right? Where the association of like animals and other things within our biohemisphere actually produce similar results. And so we know it's like these old sort of antiquated conversations have to be addressed. But I think beyond those conversations, it's also looking at how do we how do we lean into these conversations, right? That could be moments, but I think it's also about people getting activated themselves. Like it is okay to be it is okay to be afraid. It is okay to worry. And what are you doing with that worry? How are you transforming that energy, right? Because how are you shifting the narrative about something happening to you and something that you are like combating and moving against? And I think for a lot of people in social movements, and I think one of the things that makes me most proud about being Puerto Rican is like, you know, Puerto Ricans don't F around. We go and find out, and then we organize. And that, as a cultural aspect, I think has always been something that has really astonished me, right? Because when the island is in pain, people aren't moving as like un partido el otro, right? People aren't talking about politics. They're saying like, me and my community, me and my neighbors, me and the people around me need the system, the structure, the thing to change, and we mobilize, right? And then it's like you got a million Puerto Ricans like shutting down the Capitol. Um, but I think it's those kind of conversations that require us to also get tender with people, because I think people don't actually understand the severity of things sometimes when they feel less impacted.
Yeah.
Right.
Gabby, I'll tell you one thing, Stephen. I'm gonna share what happened in. We just came back from Los Angeles, and Stephen and I checked in into this amazing 5-star hotel, and we were celebrating Stephen's birthday, and they left a little note in the room with a bottle of champagne and something to eat. I don't remember what it was, but in the note they made the assumption that it was Mr. and Mrs. And we could have said, well, they meant really well, so thank you. But it was honestly, Gabby, it felt so offensive that we thanked them, but we addressed it. Like we talked about the importance of not making those assumptions, because it is meaningful to address who we are as Mr. and Mr. And I think that goes back to oftentimes people are so caught up in living comfortably in their lane. And I think we all have that responsibility. We have, first of all, we have the responsibility with ourselves, as ourselves. Where are we living comfortably in our lane? And what do we need to do to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, as you said? But we also have that responsibility to nudge others around us, in particular those who are close to us, who may not understand what it is that we are concerned about, that we're fighting for. Like right now, I am very afraid of my constitutional right to be married to Stephen. What if that changes? People talked about that the Roe versus Wade was never going to change, and look what happened. It got overturned. So,
Yeah.
LGBTQ, marriage equality could get overturned at any point, and that's very scary to us. Stephen, anything else you want to say before the break? I think Stephen, it's not here. So you know what, Gabby, we're going to take a break. We do need to take a
Go
commercial
for it.
break, and we will be right back. Hang in there with us.
Yeah, of course.
And hello, everyone. Welcome back to Get a Grip with Coach Elix. I am your host, Coach Elix. With me, my wonderful co host,
Stephen Frederick is here.
Stephen Frederick. And today we have Gabby Garcia Vera, who is live from Puerto Rico. He is a passionate racial equality, immigration rights, liberation, and LGBTQ advocate, and he is engaged in a conversation with us about Pride Month and why is Pride important. Now, Gabby, at the break, our producer Mark wanted to ask you a question around big companies like Target, Bud Light, who have been involved in recent issues around supporting LGBTQ products or not supporting LGBTQ products because they feel the pressure, from their patrons. So how would you respond to things like that, and what do we do? What can we do to 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 better that response from these individuals and organizations?
I mean, think I think that the way to engage in these conversations, right, is like to put our money where our mouth is, right? Like when companies show up and show us how they are going to treat us or to treat people, then we in turn, like our spending power has power, right? There's so many ways to flex and to move both like socio but political power. And I think it's not just about having conversations, with companies, but I think it's also about showing companies that like if they're not in alignment with like the people that they serve, that it's important to for them to feel the crunch or the weight of the muscle behind it. And I think more so than that, right? I think corporate social responsibility as a whole has become has become a place of lots of virtue signaling, but not lots of virtue, right? Lots of people are willing to come out and say, I believe that all life matters rather than just say like Black Lives Matter, right? I think this is a key and critical point, and I think it also applies to LGBTQ rights when we think about this across the spectrum, right? Like when people are unwilling to name you, to say your name, to bring you into the room, that is also a response. I think
Mm.
so often we're like seeking for people to validate, to give us permission, to give us access. Like we don't need people's permission. We get to actually show up wholly as ourselves. And when people tell us that they don't want us, that is a response. When people pull back because they are afraid of the whiplash rather than say, actually, we stand in complete alignment with people. Like people get to be all of who they are, and when they are in our places of business, when they are in alliance with us, when they buy our products, we want them to know that they are our people, right? And
Mm.
that is very different from people sort of holding their tongue, worrying about like, okay, cool, you're worried about losing sales because people think that you support LGBTQ people. What does that tell the LGBTQ people that do work for you,
Yep.
right? Like, I got bad news for people. The data has shown us that like younger and younger folks are only getting queerer and queerer. You know what I mean? Like we're looking at the data, and it's like one in every like eight Zoomers is like identifies as like some like spectrum of LGBTQIA plus. Um, like
Yep.
and so I got bad news for folks. Like this is not an anomaly. Like we're here to be, and I think it also says something. I think that there are also people that seek to, much like when we talk about race and racism in queer and trans community, I think that there is a desire to sort of back away, especially when things give us that sort of comfort, that serotonin boost. Like I think, people talk oftentimes about drinking as liquid courage. Cool. Well, is it courage if you need to unlock it through a thing that actually produces the sensation of numbing?
Mm.
Like, is that courage, or is that a mask to say like, oh, okay, because when I'm whatever, then I'll finally do it, right? Like when you're in the perfect space, when you're in the perfect place, like eso no existe. That's not a real thing. And
Yes.
we can talk about that, but I think it's like we need to really hold companies accountable. I think the way to do that is with our pocketbooks and with our wallets, and to really say. And then I think we need to really hold into accountability. Like when companies say they're going to do something, are they actually doing things, or is it a virtue signal? And during the pandemic, we saw like hundreds, dozens of like major corporations get diversity, equity, and inclusion officers. How many of those people are still in their jobs right now? How many of those people were given the resources to actually implement a vision or a strategy for change across those companies? How many of them were given the authority to make choices and decisions that actually would directly impact, right, the conversation around those pieces internally? And when we look at the data, it's like stars, but like not many, right? If any. We saw like a trouncing in, and I think here's the other thing. I think we have to be in relationship to our own people, right? So this conversation about corporations, I think, is an important one because I think we also saw, in lieu of hiring someone who, like, just because someone has a lived experience does not mean that they are in alignment with us. It does not mean that they share a politic with us. It doesn't mean that they have an understanding, neither cultural nor contextual, of the things that impact everyone else and social oppression. And I think lots of people went out and put up a lot of like white gay men and like black women as their like DEI, like, DEI directors, rather than actually like vet some people on the influx and be like, cool, we need to actually get someone who does this for work, because sharing that lived experience doesn't mean that you share a political ideology or an understanding of what doing equity work looks like. I tell a lot of my clients oftentimes, they're like, well, I don't see diversity, equity, and inclusion in this proposal. And I'm like, because the proposal is equitable. I was like, I'm not seeking to diversify or to include people. I'm seeking to work from an equity framework where people are being brought in at various points of a conversation to have some stake and some name in the conversation and the trajectory that we're going. And I think that's like part of the nuance of the difference, right? I think lots of companies are virtue signaling and they're not actually doing the work. And some of them are, right? I think there's a lot of companies out there that are like taking steps. And I think specifically around the repro piece, we saw a lot of people coming out and saying, well, we will pay for our employees to fly if they need to get an abortion. Okay, cool. That's great. I don't think your employees want to tell you if they need to get an abortion. I don't think that's any of your business. The more scary part about the fall of Roe v. Wade is not just simply the fall of access to care for people, because when I think about queer and trans community, right, I think about how, at the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, this country spent 5 years not talking about it. Not talking about it, denying it, like sort of like sidelining queer and trans people who really had to get up in the faces of people and say, like, we're not going to die in silence. We didn't come here for this. And really our right to marriage is based on that fundamental battle around the AIDS epidemic, not because we're talking about HIV and AIDS specifically as it relates to care, but because of what happened to so many of the people who we loved and who we cared about, but we had to bury, and really thinking about what it meant for their loved ones to live on past them, right? And to be able to continue to live in the apartments that they shared, continue to have a right as a spouse, as a partner, to have some say in the funeral of people that they loved and cared about around their assets, right? Like, we didn't just seek marriage because it felt like warm and fuzzy. We sought marriage because it was an avenue of legal protection that identified and protected the people we loved the most.
Yes.
And I
Gabby,
think it's so nuanced.
I will tell you, we could have you for a number of other shows, and that's exactly what we're gonna do because, You definitely bring a wealth of information that I think it's necessary. But we have reached the top of the hour, and I'm so thankful that you joined us, and I thank you so much for your time and your attention. So, Gabby, before we leave, why don't you tell our listeners if they want to connect with you, how can they connect with you?
Yeah, of course. Thank you all for having me. I really, really enjoyed our conversation. Folks can reach me. Um, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, all Facebook, all the things. And you can find me at G, the number two, and then E, and then Vera, VERA, or at Flamboyant Consulting, and that's flamboyantconsulting.com. It's also our Insta, it's our LinkedIn profile, everything through there. It's got a flamboyant flower, mad beautiful. It was designed by a very good friend of mine, Romy Torrigo. But you'll notice it right away.
Be- Beautiful. And Stephen and I love the flamboyant. Gabby, thank you so much
Thanks,
for
Gabby.
for your time. We're fascinated listening to you. Thank you for everything that you do and for the contribution you make to our community. And we will have you back very soon. Um, so thank you, Gabby. Okay, Stephen, today was super informational. I learned a lot listening to Gabby. How about you?
Yes, same here.
Yeah, so tell us about you. What's been going on with you before we close the show?
Well, you just can go to my website, stephenthemedium.com, to check out the events that are there as well as events that are coming up. But two that are coming up, July 30th, I'll be at the Green Room 42 in New York City. If you are around that area or know anybody in the area, that's such a fantastic venue. So that is a Sunday at 1 p.m., July 30th. And then August 22nd, closer to home in Massachusetts, I'll be at the Public House, and that is in Sturbridge Village. It's a Tuesday night at 6:30. That's going to have a amazing dinner, and then I will do my thing of readings. And there's some other things, but just go on my website and you can check that all out and make sure that you add yourself to my email list, and you will really know what's going on.
Really? So the Green Room 42 is a major event in New York City. I think that anyone, if you are in the New England area, New York City area, that's a place that you do not want to miss. And also the Public House. Public House is just a fabulous venue here in New England. So, and if they want to make an appointment with you via Zoom, Stephen the Medium,
Yes, right through my website.
Stephen the Medium, he is the number one medium in the world. Just saying.
Thank you.
Take it from his husband. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, all of you listening to today's show. I hope today's show was as informational for all of you as it was for us. And we'll be back next week. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone.